So today, we're going to be finishing up a bit of discussion about rewriting pragmatics, just to sort of, there's been a lot of details, and I just want to hammer home some themes and remind us of several choices we have when it comes to representing, capturing information as objects. In choices, we have different ways we can capture information in schemas that are not exactly the same, but provide alternative ways of encoding some key information. But there are differences. And I'm hoping that won't take more than 20 minutes or so. And then we'll transition to Xiaoyan to introduce us to the whole issue of data migration. And data migration is one of the most valuable pieces that helps us in software engineering use of these tools. It helps us transition rules, for example, formulated at a smaller scale to rules at a larger scale. For example, rules formulated without reference to a network to rules that take the interaction formulated without reference to a network and then applies it in a network where people are on the same node or where they're on a node separated just by one edge from each other. We can take these rules and sort of apply them in these broader contexts for use of data migration. It also is a key tool for keeping our data evolved as our schema evolves. And that's another key use of it. That's more emphasized in the literature, but it's a key tool, and we'll spend more than this session on it. Okay, but I'd like to see if we can wrap up this rewriting pragmatics. So we've been talking about rewriting and referring to double push-out rewriting. We're all familiar with this now, right? Where we have some pattern to be matched and we update it with replacement, and I indicates the common components, and we're applying that pattern within a broader context, like the current state of the model, and we get some updated state, right? We've talked about this a lot before, but we're not going to go into details. But what I tried to communicate, and I think may have been hard to see the forest for the trees, is that there's a variety of particular challenges or complications that come in with the pragmatics, the sort of practical side of rewriting. This all sounds nice, where these are C-sets, and these are C-set homomorphisms, right? C-sets from some schema. These are C-set homomorphisms, but there are things that require us to be clever. There are ways in which there are issues that force us, when we have a C-set, when we choose a schema category C, that require us or behoove us to think carefully about what's the structure, what's the design of that schema category, to design it artfully, to design it thoughtfully, to avoid some issues. And we talked about a variety of issues: dependencies, imposing constraints, this issue of not being able to have like a C-set, something for I that's only a partial C-set. We need a full C-set for L, I, and R. Can't have a partial one, even though maybe we want to express it. We have this choice that I'm going to be finishing up today and emphasizing: encoding information as attributes or encoding it as objects. And somewhat, when I introduced attributes, I was a bit glib in saying we use them to encode values where we care what the value is. Truth is, we can, by being clever, we can use objects to do some of that as well. And we'll see there's multiple ways we can use objects. And then there's some issues with expressivity of C-sets. Like, we'd really like to be able to have sometimes say this person is a product of their province, of their, their sex and their disease state or something like that. But But right now in CATLab, we can't do that. We can't express products. We can't even express co-products that either you're in this state or that state or that state. And I mean, CATLab is just unbelievably rich in many ways and allows us to do incredible things, but it does not have this ability to sort of express these things. Okay, so again, trying to make you see the forest and not lose that for the trees. Don't be blinded by the trees for not being able to see the forest itself. We talked about a variety of these issues. So I'm just illustrating these. Like, if we have person and we have a dependency of dog on person, this perhaps prevents us from rewriting person, because there's a dog person pointing to a given person, and we can't have like a match over here in L to a dog pointing, a particular dog point, or sorry, a dog pointing to a person pointed to by a dog who lives in Saskatchewan, and rewrite it to be a person pointed to by that dog, the same person pointed to by that dog who lives now in BC, and have this in the middle, because this is not a valid C set. It's not a valid C set because each dog needs a person to whom it refers. We can't have, what this is saying is there's one dog and 0 persons. The set of this is 1, the set of this is 0, of 0 size, and that's not legitimate, right? Because when this maps over into set, that would imply a function from a set of size 1 to a set of size 0, right? Yeah, not expressing it perfectly, but I think you remember the idea, right? Now, we found that wasn't a showstopper, right? Do you remember this? For example, we found if we want to rewrite things by cleverly refactoring, by choosing how to structure it, we could do so nicely. For example, if we want to rewrite the HbA1c score, do you remember this? We could carve it off into something which person doesn't refer to, but refers to person, right? Right here we had a problem because we want to update their province, but it's referred to by the person, and therefore we have to kind of delete person and add it again and you know, with a new attribute, and we can't do that here. But by carving this thing off here, we don't have person depending on it. We have it, you know, being carved off to person health state, and every person health state has an associated person. We can delete person health state and have a new one, and it's fine. All right, because there's not a dependency from person. Do we got that idea? Okay, so just again trying to remember, and so we could carve this off. Now this this gave us this ability to update HbA1c levels, right? But if we had province up here, we can't update province here because of the same problem with the dog, right? The dog is a dependency on person. We can't delete the person to update their province. We would have to copy province to be under something something else, right? So we could, for example, have personal health state oddly include province, right? In the same basic idea. You get that point, that whether it's HbA1c or province, by sort of carving it off to be under this and having this dependent person, not vice versa, we avoid this, we can delete this, and we can add province in, right? But it's not without entanglement, right? Like, now, maybe we want to update our province. So we want to update someone, a person with a dog who's in Saskatchewan, to a person, that same person with same dog who's in BC. But we saw last time that this caused a problem. Remember that? Like, if we had a free-floating variable, it said, like, I don't know where this free-floating variable is coming from, right? We didn't want to have to insist on a value there. We want to apply to all people with all HbA1c values, but we weren't able to do that because, you know, algebraic rewriting said, like, I don't know how to deal with this free-floating variable because we didn't have it under this. We didn't preserve it. We want to preserve it here, but we can't preserve it. If we put all these things here, then we're not going to be able to rewrite this BC thing, right? In any case, there might be a way to sort of refactor this, but this by itself is not working. Do you remember that? We encountered that last time, and again, I want to put it into context because we saw a lot of different things interactively. And so if we want to update province, you know, we might want to put under here. Yes.
I don't know. I just think, could we just make dog has attribute province? Correct.
Well, yeah, you could. You could have dog. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because you don't have dependency on dog. You have dog on person, so you could delete dog and add dog in the same dog, and you could do that, and it'll be no problem. Yeah. So good point, but all of it is to the point that when we are talking about rewriting, it's we want to think ahead. We have to fly ahead of the plane. We can't just say, well, create a schema and wouldn't it be nice to do some rewriting with it? And like, you want to think ahead, like, what do we need to point to what? Is that going to cause problems? This is a changing story, actually. As we are speaking, well, okay, not today. He's at a Thanksgiving table, but Chris Brown, it's I think working to make this sort of thing possible, and CPAR, or at least that's the rumor, kinda, maybe. You know, it may be that in another year or two, it may be a lot easier. But right now, it's a little bit, you got to do some thinking, you got to do some pre-planning, or you're going to have to, you're gonna have to pre-factor, or you'll have to refactor in practice and fix things up. So it behooves us to think these things through, right? Ahead of time. Now, I do want to emphasize something that is a point I know UGF picked up on earlier, which is, look, when it comes to encoding province, like as a attribute, it says it as an attribute. That's why I drew a dotted line, right? These are dotted lines because it's an attribute of it, right? An alternative would be to have it as an object, right? And so, you know, Saskatchewan is an object, Manitoba is an object, Newfoundland. Now, this may seem weird, but let me hear me out on this. So I think we're all comfortable that a C set for this schema would have, when it maps over to set, person object is going to map to an object in set, and an object in set is a what? It is a what? It says that. It says that, right? So it's going to be a set of people. And Saskatchewan is going to map to a set of people who live in Saskatchewan, is the idea, right? And each of those people is a person, some person, but in general, it's going to be a subset of this, right? It'd be nice if we could somehow tell it this is a monic arrow. This is a sub-object of that, or when we map it to set, this is a subset of that. It'd be nice if we could say this is monic, right? But there's not a way to do that in the language right now of what CatLab supports. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. It's a lot of powerful things being contemplated, but right now a lot of Evan's focus is on CatCoLab. And a lot of Chris's focus is in GATLab and algebraic rewriting also. But this, you know, in the multi-year time, like a 1 or 2 year time frame, it's possible we'll be able to indicate things as monic or products. But I think you see, this may look a bit weird at first, but it kind of has a coherence all its own that, you know, this is going to go over to set the subset of people who live in Saskatchewan. Do you see this? Now, what you really would like to do, if this looks, does this look to you? Well, okay, maybe it just looks to you messy, but if you squint at this, you might be forgiven for thinking this should remind you of a coproduct. Do you remember a coproduct? You have Remember, for a product, you have if in a product structure, you have the apex, which we sometimes abuse and we call product of A and B. But when you have a product of, so maybe we call this informally A cross B, but the product is really the whole thing, where this is a projection, right? It just takes the part of it, right? And this, maybe I'll call it pies of A, pies of B, right? Chris is probably eating pies of pumpkin right now, but well, let him comment on that. Are we okay with this? Okay, so here, that's what a product looks like. Do you remember what a co-product is? Co-product, I'll give you a hint. It's a dual to a product. Okay, all we do is we do what? We flip the arrows, right? So now these are injection maps. Injection A, injection B. Commonly, actually, the right is like iota or something. And this is A plus B. It's the same thing. It's just turn around, right? It's just, but here we can get an A plus B from an A, right?
Yeah.
Or we can get an A plus B from a B, right? So it's the same thing. And if you look at that and squint, I think you might see something like what you see on the screen, right? You know, like this is like an injection map into person. Do you see that? This is like so what you wish you could say, what you wish you could whisper to it is that this is a co-product of these things. Person is a co-product of these things, and maybe, yeah, it's a co-product of these, but right now we don't have that affordance within CATLAB. It doesn't allow us. There is a thing called a sketch, which Evan talks about sometime, that maybe they'll end up supporting sketches which have finite limits. You could do products. So this is a topic of thinking for like how CATLAB could be more expressive. But kind of if you have limits, you can do products, you could do monics, or you could do co-limits, and you could do epics, and you could do co-products. So this is one way to encode it, I think we could see, right? And I actually provide, and I'm not going to spend much time on it here because I want to get to the real star of the show, which is Cheyenne here. But this one I provided, problem with rewriting attributes, successful fix with products. I just do it for Saskatchewan and BC, and I basically show, you know, that okay, you could have a generic person, you can have generic resident BC. This is just an object, right? Or just saying, you know, for this object, it's getting representable of the BC object, getting the representable of the Saskatchewan object, getting the sort of the essence of being a BC person, the essence of being a Saskatchewan person, or whatever. And then we can take a homomorphism from generic person into generic resident BC, generic resident of Saskatchewan, and then we can put together a rule, right? Using those homomorphisms right there. Okay, I have generic person in the center, right? Generic person in the kind of in the center. I can have that. I can have generic person in the center without problem. Whether or not they have a dog, I think. And then on the left-hand side, L of my L of this is going to be generic resident of BC. Okay, it's a BC person, and that's what generic resident BC right there. Oh, sorry. Right. This one, generic resident of BC right here, right? And then I can have a generic person and generic resident of Saskatchewan for this side, and I can end up rewriting it accordingly. Now, I'm not making this contingent on them having a dog. I'm not saying, we're going to move someone from Saskatchewan to BC if they have a dog. If so, I'd need a dog as well. And that might actually raise, then the generic person in the middle would have a dog too. They'd have a dog as well, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun. So here I formulated a rule. No fancy stuff with attribute variables, nothing like that. Just plain Jane, plain old objects where we have an object for this. So we have something like this as the left one, and we have something like this as the right one, and then in the middle we just have person. Are we okay with that? And it's fine and no problem. So that's a possibility. Choice of representations matter. So this is one way we've seen to encode information. It's conceptually straightforward, right? Each person, I'm sort of putting this in this bigger context now. Each person as an age and a province as an attribute, conceptually straightforward. It avoids, having objects for each province to encode the information. It's concise, right? It's quite clear. You have age, you have province. And it captures the fact that, that you have to be one of these ages or have to be in one of these provinces. The problem is attribute rewriting is tricky, right? You may have to do this prefactoring or refactoring, right? This like personal health state. Do you see that? Okay. Here's another way. Now, this is one I actually kind of like. Do you notice the difference between this one and this one? Well, okay, there's a monic here. This is true. I put it as monic, but these are objects. So here, each person has an age, but this is a relation. So this is an object. This is combinatorial data, as they would say. This is a relation, right? It's not an attribute. Here, it was an attribute, and we saw we could contort ourselves and sort of carve things off in this person health state, and we can make it work. We can make it work. It's okay, but it's a bit messy to have to think about that ahead of time. This is kind of interesting. You have person, object, age, object, province, object, and you have these relations, right? And then, but you may say, well, yeah, that's all fine and good, but we care about what their age is. Like we care if they're an elder. We care if they're a child. So shouldn't that be an attribute? Well, here, look, you have a map from age to like name, or map from an age to something which basically allows you to be clear about what each one is. Maybe age is in a different order. Maybe it puts elder first and then child and then middle age, but we don't care about that ordering so much as what each one is. We could have an attribute on it, okay? And that is a possibility. You encode it this way. This is something Chris suggested actually, as one way you can encode this, which is kind of interesting. We'd have to think, does it avoid that problem, right? But it is one way of encoding, okay? That where these are objects and this is an attribute. Okay, another one I think you realize, like, we could, okay, this is like, okay, I'm gonna restrain my language. This is another way to encode that information, right? It's a bit ugly, right? We have an object for every like age group, every province. It's additive, right? Like as we add heterogeneity, we just add the extra. It's not multiplicative, right? We don't have all combinations, but we needed an object for each division from whatever thing. It's a little bit messy, but it allows for very clear rewrite rules. You can just move people from this one to this one. Simple. Yeah, I mean, it's you kind of multiply these objects in kind of a way that, one of my one of my principles I like to apply with modeling. I find it ugly when I have to modify the structure of my model just to account for the patterns in the data I happen to see. I find that whether it's a dynamic model like a stock flow model, modifying it to add stocks just because I happen to have 3 age groups or something, it just feels unclean. You know, maybe later I'll have 7 age groups and
It's like a really, as you said, stock flow and phrase the dimensionality is similar. Do you consider all of them as objects?
yeah, except here it's additive, right? Like if we needed to say, we want to keep track of are they born in Canada or not, we would just add 2, right? But it's kind of, it rubs me the wrong way, but it is an option. It does not make clear that these are all the age groups. It doesn't say like you're either in this or this or this, right? It doesn't say you're in these, which is really a matter of, it'd be nice if we could say this is a product of the co-product of these 3 and the co-product of these 3. Now, that would be nice, right? That'll be at the heart of it. But right now we can't do that. And okay, now this is the curse of dimensionality. There you go, Ujaya. Age 17, 0 to 17 from BC. Here's age 0 to 17 from Alberta. Here's age 0 to 17 from Saskatchewan. You just have you have an object for all combinations of things. This is the curse of dimensionality. Like if you have another dimension, like are they born in Canada or not, you double the number of these objects, right? And it's kind of a race to the bottom. I think I find it ugly. So does this encode the information? Yeah, it encodes the information. It encodes it in a way that I find undignified. I find displeasurable. At some points, I might find it distressing or disturbing. I find this objectionable aesthetically. I find this somewhat objectionable. This is not too bad. I like this, but it pops out elsewhere with these rules that we've been seeing, these whole refactoring. But what I do want to communicate is algebraic rewriting. The rewriting is a moving target. Chris Brown, and Evan are both exquisitely sensitive to these issues. They are able to think through very quickly what these issues are, and they want to move it to better support these things. So I do think in another year or 2, we will have a much clearer system. It's hard to remember just how much has happened in the past, 2 years, I think. And so I think we'll be in a very different place. They hear our pain. And they are listening. And Chris supposedly is engaged in some refactoring that's going on now that may of the code base to allow us to do less twisting, and I think do things like this perhaps. Okay, so those are all the comments I have about rewriting pragmatics. Are there any questions before we turn to the real star of the show, which is Xiaoyan? Any question? No? Uh-huh.
I am interested in
Uh-huh.
knowing one example from ITB in this rewriting. Can you give me an example
From
the ITB model, for example? How can we rewrite the base of the which one is the best?
well, it's good. Personally, I find it's a matter of what you have to rewrite, I think, and I will say that to my aesthetics, this and this are both pretty nice for representation of things. I don't think this is too bad, like this, sorry, this one is too bad. If you're just updating one thing, I don't find it too bad at all, right? Where I think it gets messy is if you have to update province, you have to deal at some level with this issue that I articulate here, that you know, you have an unbound variable. There may be another way to do that, but I think, you know, you might be in a situation where you need person health state and then you need person province state. So you can update their province or something like that. And I guess that's less bad. I find that less objectionable than this or than this, and especially than this. I find this like the heart of darkness. Like, this is why I go to categorical methods to escape this madness. This is why we stratify categorically, to escape madness. Let's not descend into madness just because we lack some forethought in rewriting things. I don't find this so bad, but you may have to sort of have a number of these if you're updating multiple attributes. So I'd say this, if I had to rank, I'd probably say, well, this leads to a lot of, if you can do it, it's great, but it may cause that problem with rewriting where you have to, you know, factor things out. Maybe I'd put up with that for one or two of these things, probably 1, 2, or 3, and then maybe I'd go to this type of thing. But Cheyenne,
Yeah.
you're actually more experienced than I.
Yeah, I think in theory, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
But in application, the problem is, there may be some painful part when we, in the application, when we have the attributes. So, I mean, when we're dealing with the attributes, both in defining the rewrite rule and in the ABM. So for the computation of the ABM, so we also encounter some problems. Do you remember?
So I think.
So that's
right.
Yeah. So I'm not sure whether Chris fixed that or not.
So you're thinking objects are pretty safe.
Yeah.
They're the safe recourse.
Yeah.
For things that have to update.
Yeah. So so I like the ugly, the second, the last one. So.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of transparent too.
Okay. It is transparent. I mean, when it's kind of transparent in a brutalist way or something. So one point here is that you can do objects if you have discrete values, right? If you have HbA1c, which you want to be a continuous value,
yes,
then an attribute is your only ticket, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I want to think through the consequences of this, because that is something Chris suggested, which has a certain.
Yeah. I didn't see an example.
Yeah.
So
maybe we could think that through. Yeah. Okay, but let's get to the real act, the class act, Cheyenne. Okay, so